All right. Good evening. My name is D2 Kasui. I'd like to welcome you to the Urban Financial Services Coalition Relief Session. And we are so happy to talk about PPP. You got your PPP. Now, what do you do next? And we have brought together some fabulous, two fabulous speakers that are going to share some good news, because who doesn't want to have their loan forgiven? You know,
right?
That is like, how else can you say you can get some free money? We all would love to be able to get some free money. So on today's agenda, I'm doing the welcome now. Welcome to our session. And we will hear a few remarks from our national president. Then I will introduce the speakers. Speakers will have a discussion. And then we'll have Q&A. And as I mentioned earlier, while they are having the discussion, if you have a question, you can send in the chat box. I'll be monitoring it. Or you can save it to the question and answer period. And we want to make sure that every question that people ask gets answered tonight. And then we'll make some announcements of some upcoming events. And so with no further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, my friend, my leader of the Urban Financial Services Coalition, President Ola Truelove. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kasui. It's so awesome to be here. Oh, Amy gave me a hand clap. Thank you, Amy. So awesome to be here with you all this evening. Just from a national level, I just know that there's a lot of unrest going across our nation and across other countries involving the unjust, and it's just been awful. But I certainly believe Black Lives Matter. Urban Financial Services Coalition, we stand in support of the efforts for the peaceful protests. And I was just sharing with the breakout room that I actually participated. I went down this past Saturday, or was trying to get that out of me. And but in solidarity, we are standing, because what we've got to do is we've got to have a change in America as it relates to the injustice of the police, and also the economics for Black people. And all lives do matter. I totally agree. But what this is about is the fact that Black lives matter, and that's where we stand. The other thing that I'd like to share with you from a national level is that I am elated to share that we've got a new website that will be posted on next Monday, June the 15th. I'd love for you all to take a look at that, www.ufscnet.org. And it's going to be a wonderful, new, exciting website. I want you to join us. If you're not members, reach out. So thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate our guest speakers tonight. I'm so looking forward to learning all I can about what happens after the PP loan money is there. So D2, thank you for allowing me to say those few words, and know that we are all in this together. And I need each and every one of your support to make our organization strong. We're in a space and time now where we can make a change. And I'm looking for all of your support to help me make that change. Blessings to you all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ola. President Truelove, we are in this thing together. And it is my pleasure to introduce this young lady. You know, I met her a couple of years back, and she and a whole cadre of young people started to become a part of Urban Financial Services Coalition. And this, person has so much energy, so much excitement, that we were so excited to be associated with her. And one thing, most people are just captured by her beauty, but if you just talk to her one moment, you would see her intellect just shine through. And so our speaker, she's the president of Grid 202 Partners, a financial planning firm with locations in Washington, D.C. and North Carolina. And she has nearly 2 decades of financial planning and investment experience assisting high net worth individuals, endowments and foundations, business owners with comprehensive wealth solutions and holistic planning. She started her career at Vanguard, and that's where she worked with the ultra high net worth individuals and endowment and foundations and inclusive majority universities, hospitals, and charitable organizations throughout the Southeast United States. Her client relationships range from 20 million to 450 million and represented 3 billion in total assets prior to leaving her role. She is also strong in the community. She is on the board of directors for the CFP board. The CFP board of directors is the policymaking and oversight body of the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards Incorporated for over 86,000 professionals in the United States.
Wow.
And she also serves on the investment committee for Women Against Abuse, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And she earned her BA and MBA from Pennsylvania State University, and she is a certified financial planner, holds licenses for life, health, and long-term care insurance. Let's give a big round of applause for Kamila McDonnough. Woo, woo. Give some hand claps. All right. And she is joined with another young lady who is equally as beautiful and equally as talented. Our next speaker is a professional leader with extensive knowledge and experience in effective execution. You gotta love somebody that knows how to get things done. And she has over 25 years of financial organizational development and operational experience. Her background and expertise lies in budget oversight, projections, bookkeeping, in accounting, 401ks and annuities, internal controls, and insurance. And she has worked in corporate America and nonprofits and prefers the nonprofits industry because she feels that she can utilize more of her talents and abilities to give back to others. And as the director of the Women Business Center Charlotte, our speaker is responsible for providing the strategic direction and guidance for the organization's vision, the development of developing and training and counseling programs, and managing staff and overseeing organization's budget. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the table Natalie Williams. Give her a big round of applause. So Natalie and Kamila, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, D2, and I'm happy to be here with Natalie and all of you this evening. So I know the purpose of this conversation is to talk about PPP, and I forget who said this earlier, but the reason why we're here and the reason there's so much interest especially is that this loan program continues to it actually evolved again last week, right? So to fill your comment, everything we're talking about today is as of June 10th at 6:53 p.m., right? Let's just time stamp this because new regulations are being apparent. There's more interpretation that's being done with the Department of Treasury regarding forgiveness. But we're here today to share with you all the information that we know thus far. And to give you a little bit of background about our interaction with PPP, I'm a financial advisor. I work with small business owners. I've been able to have them successfully obtain PPP funding. And part of my role is to ensure that loan gets forgiven, reviewing spreadsheets, spending expenses. And then Natalie, I'm not sure if this was mentioned, but the Women's Business Center of Charlotte is an SBA sponsored organization. And Natalie is very well versed and very well educated on all things PPP, and she's been a valuable resource for me. And that's why, we asked for her to be here with us today to share her knowledge as well. So I think everyone here knows PPP, but I think before we go into the loan forgiveness aspect, Natalie, if you can speak at a high level, what was the PPP loan designed to do, and what are some of the terms that were initially provided?
So thank you very much for allowing me to be here. I don't feel like an expert anymore because things have changed, and we just actually got some more notice today in regards to the 5-year maturity thing. So this thing continues to just evolve and move around. But actually the Paycheck Payroll Protection Plan was designed so that employees had the ability to bring back their staff. That was the intention, and the entire goal was to make sure that people who were who had staff members had the ability to onboard those staff members, keep them onboarded, and to lessen the number of people who were taking on unemployment. However, that did not absolutely happen. So what happened was a lot of small businesses were experiencing a lot of difficulty. They were not able to understand the ramifications of everything that needed or the requirements for the loan. And as a result, a lot of people had to lay off, furlough their employees, unfortunately, and then they went on unemployment. And while they went on unemployment, it made it difficult for them to bring them back on staff. So the intent of the PPP was to make it an opportunity. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The intent was to make it an opportunity to retain the staff and to utilize the formulas and the calculations that were used by the SBA to extend the employment period beyond, at least 6 to 8 weeks. That was not necessarily the case and how it happened. So, so the term is really the Payroll Protection Plan, and it was designed to do specifically that, to protect the payroll.
Okay, thank you. And as you mentioned, when they initially came up with this the end of March, I think the House and the Senate thought this would be a short duration type of event, right? So the initial was 8 weeks. It was 8 weeks from the date of receipt of funding. Can you share a little bit, as this has continued to prolong, right? So, I work with some businesses that are not considered essential, and they were only able to even open their doors not until mid-May or towards the end of May. And because of the essential businesses taking longer to really be able to open and actually bring employees back, right? Like pay them for actually doing work. How has that changed the PPP terms? And I know there was an update last week. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how you structured it in light of the current environment?
Sure. In light of the current environment, I think what happened was, and I'll just be transparent, I think the SBA tried to do a really good job of putting together something that was not designed to be infrastructure the way that it was within a short period of time. It was like a 10-day period to try to roll out this billion-dollar process. And so in the process, what has happened is I believe that they have realized that there are so many small businesses. A couple of things happened, really. One, a lot of the small businesses that the money was intended for, it wasn't getting to them. And it wasn't getting to them fast enough, right? Two, the infrastructure for the banking system wasn't in place like it could have been. A lot of banks, first of all, when it rolled out, a lot of banks were not ready. Because they didn't have enough information on how they were going to structure people coming in, what the database system was, and the influx of people utilizing that robust system. I had one person say to me, I applied today, and I'm like, you applied, and plus another 1 million people applied. So there was a lack of employment. People needed more employees to help with that particular type of infrastructure. So you had funding that was not going to the people who needed and people who were getting it that didn't need it. Then you had an infrastructure that kind of like broke down a little bit. And then they got themselves together. And then it was a confusion over what was the difference between this program and the other program that was running simultaneously. So all of this kind of made a whole bunch of confusion for a lot of small businesses. Some people didn't know whether or not they were applying for the EIDL. Other people didn't know if they were applying for the PPP. So in light of the things that have happened and the funding that has gone out, I know that the SBA has done, I think it's over, I forget the number. I have the number in my other report about how much money they were able to disperse, and even in the Charlotte area. But with what is going on now, the changes that they have put into place, I think they realized is that the period in which they have asked people to respond in was a period of 8 weeks, which kind of made it a little difficult, to your point, Kamila, for people to be able to either get back into the office, to bring back people on staff, and those people who wanted to come back on staff, because that was another huge issue. Employees were finding out they had to furlough and lay off individuals, and then when they asked them to come back, a lot of people didn't want to come back because they were making more money on unemployment, right? Another reason why people didn't want to come back, because of the misrepresentation, I guess you want to call it, with the guidelines. So people were fearful, they didn't want to come back. So there have been some things that they have put into place for that. So one of the things is that they realized that we need a longer period of time. So instead of it being 8 weeks, it is now 24 weeks. And what that means is that but there's some rules to that 24 weeks, Amy. So those rules are this: if individuals have already applied prior to June 5th, they can get an extension, but it has to be based on the lender, okay? And the 24 weeks is after you receive the funding. So let's just say, for example, someone gets their funding tomorrow. They have 24 weeks between now until, they get their funding, between the funding and then 24 weeks out, in order to utilize the funding that they have. So it was 75% of the payroll. It is now 60% of the payroll, right? So they lowered the payroll amount, the percentage, and they also extended the period. And they've added some other things, but I think I'll wait until you ask me a little bit more before I inundate everybody with all of these little extra rules.
A lot. So just to take a step back. So
yeah,
historically, I'm saying historically, just to kind of, pre and post the Senate passing this recent bill, I think it was last Wednesday is when they passed it, right? So previously, if you got your loan on April 30th, you had to utilize all of your funds by June 30th. That was the 8-week time period. Yep. And the parameter was 75% had to be payroll, and 25% had to be things like rent, interest, utilities, basically more of the fixed expenses or utility expenses based upon contracts you had as of February 15th.
As of February 15th, yes.
That was the first iteration. As of Wednesday, I forget what day that was June 1st. As of June 1st, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Am I saying that right? Yeah. No. What day was that?
Actually, it was, my last notice was June 9th, because today is the 10th. So okay. We've gotten some more updates as of yesterday.
Yeah. So that was last week. Mm-hmm. Last week, so is this for everyone? So now it went from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. Mm-hmm. So you got your loan on April 30th. You now have up until 6 months. You have until October 30th. Mm-hmm. Right? And now, instead of it being 75%, 25, it's 60% payroll, and then 40% on things like rent, utilities, etc. Is that correct?
It is. So let's be clear about, there's some, I want to make sure we're clear on the language when we say the 60 and the 40 or the 75 and the 25, whatever it is. There are two provisos. One, they lowered the requirement that the 75% of the borrower's loan. So listen to this terminology. So this is where some tricks come in, right? The borrower's loan proceeds must be used for the payroll cost. And They lowered that 75% of the loan forgiveness. So sometimes we forget about, okay, the loan in itself, not just payroll, but the portion of the loan has to have that portion of forgiveness. So no, it's no longer 75, but now it has to be the 60%, right? So whether you use 100% of it on payroll or whatever, at least 60% of the loan forgiveness must be spent on payroll, right? And within that 24-week period, and you could use the other for operations. A lot of small businesses don't have rent. They don't have a lot of utilities that are associated with their business. So we want to make sure that they're encouraged to utilizing that amount of money, whether it's 100% or 60, but at least if you want it to be forgiven, you can't spend 80% of that money on just paying bills and utilities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. And I think one thing we're waiting for too, and I'm not sure, Natalie, if you've heard, is because for, some sole proprietors and some from very small businesses, I know that some, landlords provided rent concessions, or, their variable expenses have been reduced because they weren't open. And there's been a conversation about prepayment. So can I take my loan funds and say, all right, well, can I just prepay my rent for the remainder of the year and have that be captured in that 40%? Have you heard any guidelines about that?
Haven't heard anything about prepayment, but what I will say this is that, and what we have been advising our customers to do is to make sure, first of all, that you have a lawyer or you have an accountant that can help you through the accounting functionalities, because you want to make sure that as much of the loan, because what it is absolutely a loan, right? So that's the first misconception. People think it's just a grant and it's free money. It is an absolute loan. So you want to make sure that every bit of that loan is forgiven as much as possible. You want to make sure you're spending your money on expenses that are in that covered period. So now we've got a 24-week period, Kamila. So people can kind of pay a little bit more or a little bit longer for their money, as opposed to what they had before, which was 8 weeks. I would not recommend someone trying to prepay something beyond their 24-week period and trying to prepay that, because that will be something that will be considered unforgiving. And that's just as of today. Now they may come back later and say something else, because they have put some safe harbor rules into place around a couple of things, but that is not one thing that I have heard. I also want to say this too. If the borrower uses less than 60% of the loan amount for payroll during the forgiveness covered period, now it's the forgiveness, so we're looking at a forgiveness covered period, because they may come back and say, hey, your period was from here to here and it doesn't meet that 60%, right? So you want to be very careful about the covered period, which is the distribution of the funds that you get to now 24 weeks. So if you use less than that, the borrower, what they're saying is that you're still eligible for, they're using this terminology, you're eligible for a partial loan forgiveness. So in other words, if you don't use that in that right period of time and it's not 60%, then you will only be eligible for a partial forgiveness.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think the benefit here too is, I know everyone's looking for loan forgiveness. That's the most desired outcome for everyone. But I think one thing to keep in mind too is if you don't get loan forgiveness, the loan terms are still very favorable, right? It's pretty, so the interest rate is 1%, right? And the the payment plan is 2 years now?
Well, it's changed. Okay, so it is 1%. So after June 5th, that payment period now changes. So before that, if someone applied for the loan and they got the acceptance and they got their money, whatever the case may be, it's the 1%, 1% for 2 years. Now they're offering an extended 5-year period. Okay. Now the provisor with the 5 years is this. based on what they consider the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act of 2020, the maturity of all loans approved on or after the 5th will be for 5 years. So it's going to be an automatic in the E-Trans system that anybody that comes in after June 5th, their loans will automatically reflect 5 years. Now, loans that were approved and funded prior to that with the 2-year maturity may be extended by the lender. So if someone got the loan, they need to contact their lender and say, hey, I'm looking to see whether or not I can extend my period beyond the 2 years. The interest rate so far has not changed. It's still the 1%, but you do have an ability to extend it beyond the 2 years to now a 5-year maturity.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is important because I feel that, again, desired outcome is for loan forgiveness. But Natalie, you work with small businesses. How many businesses get access to capital at 1%?
No. I mean, that's a good, but see, the one thing I want people to know this too, is that there is an, even though there's some safe harbors around the money, people are confused as to what they need to do with the money. And I hope we get a chance to talk about that. Even though it's 1%, it doesn't mean it's 1% for you to use it for an expansion, or 1% to be used to purchase a car, or 1% to go after that contract that you wanted to do. That's not the intent of the PPP. The intent of it is to be used to help with payroll. And so by signing off on your documentations with the bank in good faith that you are stating, I absolutely needed this loan to help me stay afloat.
That's really important. And I've actually read, so on the promissory note, it's the second sentence, I think, in the terms. I am getting this loan due to economic uncertainty due to COVID-19, right?
Right.
And I think people miss that. And I think we were joking, there have been some people who've already gotten themselves in trouble by taking these PPP loan proceeds and using them for personal reasons. So I think this could be a good time to unpack it a little bit here, right? So when we chatted, excuse me, a couple of weeks ago, Natalie, you gave the best practice. So this money should always have gone into a business account.
Yes.
Right? That is the most preferred for a paper trail.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard of some people it going accidentally in a personal account, like they were a sole proprietor. I know. It went into a personal account. But one of the things that I know is to ensure that we get these things forgiven. And this happened actually, someone I know, they went with a bank where they had a personal account, and they didn't realize that where you get the loan proceeds and where they're deposited, they have to be the same provider, unless you make an intervention and say, no, don't deposit here, give me a check and I'll put it in my business account. So some of them was not intentional. It was just the bank process that resulted in that happening, right? But can you share your best practices? So once you got those funds, or if you got those funds and they are not in the proper account, what should they do to ensure that the record keeping is done in the most proper way?
So, based on the conversations that we've had with our accountants and several other individuals, number one, you definitely need to set up a separate account, Kamila, to your point. If you do have funds that are in a personal account, I would immediately take them out and I would put them into a business account if you don't already have one established, if someone was not bankable and they did not have one established. But if you are a business owner and you have your bank account, make sure those funds are in your bank account. Second of all, you want to make sure that you have a record keeping process, a very specific record keeping process as to the inflows and the outflows of the money and what those dollars are being spent on. So for example, for individuals who are bringing back people or seasonal workers, because there are some people who have seasonal workers, right? You've got people who work in a restaurant business. You've got people who are in retail. You've got people who are in different facets of this industry, but they have seasonal workers. So if you are going to bring someone back from a record keeping standpoint, you want to make sure your records are reflecting that you paid X, Y, and Z at the same rate as when they went out, or whatever the case may be, they came back in, and you paid this number of people for a certain number of weeks, and this is the money that went out. You want to make sure that you are tallying all expenses. You want to make sure that if you're paying the interest on the mortgage, not the mortgage, right? The interest on the mortgage is that you're tallying that, and you're tallying it specifically for that 8-week period. So I would start out with an Excel spreadsheet. We have some documents that we can leave as well. Kamila has them as well. You have another, a greater document. But I would start out with something to that effect, and make sure that every week that there's a record to show that this went out and this is what it was spent for. Some people are saying, oh, well, they're not going to look at you that deep, and it's, you know, there's some safe harbors, there's some things that are around all the accounting functionality, and they're looking at people who took out more than 1 million. Well, you don't want to be the person that just got the 25,000 and they're coming knocking at your door asking you, what did you really spend this money on? So I'm encouraging everybody, because information, I tell Kamila this all the time, information is going out, but it's not always received on the same level. So we want to make sure our T's are crossed and our I's are dotted. So get your system into place, get a banking system, get an accounting function system, so that you, from this day forward, you know exactly what you're doing. And if you don't have an accounting system, I would suggest getting one, so that you have a record of how the payments were made. Even if you have to hire an accounting system, I guess, or someone to help you manage the payroll, just so that it's accurate going in and coming out from this moment forward. And that's what I would suggest. So accounting system, something that's on an Excel spreadsheet, a separate account, and get an accountant or a bookkeeper to help and support with managing the funds that are coming in and going out.
Yeah, and I will share that a lot of payroll providers are providing services. I've personally seen ADP as a PPP package, where they actually put everything together in the loan forgiveness format. So they will, you know, be able to aggregate all of your payroll expenses, all of your other expenses. They have 5 different reports. And if your payroll is through them, they're making it plug and play. So I think it's really important, you know, if you do have a payroll provider, a lot of them are providing customized solutions for PPP. If you don't have a bookkeeper or accountant, it's a great time for you to reach out to, you know, I think ADP has one, QuickBooks has one, like through Intuit. Now is the time to explore and look at their PPP packages. I think that's really important.
And then, I do want to say this too. So when we're talking about that, you want to make sure that you have your tax documentations ready to go, your 940s, your 990s, you know, documentation if you had contractors and things of that nature. Want to encourage people to make sure they know the difference between their contractor and a W-2 employee, because you can't claim a contractor under a PPP. They are self-employed, they're independent contractor, so they have to claim themselves. So you want to make sure that you have a clear line of delineation of who's working for you and what their titles and their positions are, even moving forward, you know, just making sure that's a clear line.
Before you get too much farther along, is there anybody else aware that the Illinois or the American Institute of CPAs at least had a PPP forgiveness spreadsheet template available?
They do. The only thing I will say, Ted, they haven't updated it to the 60-40 formula yet. So the last I looked was yesterday. They still had the 75-25 hard coded in there. So we're waiting for them to release the new 60-40 calculation. But yes, if you go to AICPA.com, you can download a PPP loan forgiveness template, and there's tabs in the bottom with all the associated worksheets with the Schedule A and all the other information there, how to calculate your FTEs if you have part-time employees and full-time employees. That's also in that spreadsheet. But I'm just holding off, Ted, until they update that 60-40 calculation. I guess they're working on it. And
So am I.
So I think as soon as I'll let D2, I've been keeping my eye on it, as you can hear. As soon as they update the template with the correct calculation, we'll be sure to share it.
Can I ask a question here? Because I'm not sure who I'm speaking to as far as the audience, if anyone here has applied for the PPP?
Say again?
If you could put it in the chat, if anyone here has applied for the PPP. And
I have already been awarded one. I haven't taken it yet.
You haven't.
Same. Oh.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you
Are you saying applied for the loan or applied for forgiveness?
Apply for the loan.
Yeah, all of my clients have applied.
Right, I mean on this
They've all
call here, the call rate. Are these your clients here? I'm sorry, Ted. So Daryl, have you applied for the loan or do you need a loan? You have not, okay. All right.
Hi, this is Melanie Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Melanie Lee. We applied and were funded 3 weeks ago. So this is timely for us. 4
Okay,
weeks ago.
very good, very good. So, and you were, now did anybody here apply for the EIDL? Advance.
Hi, this is Renita G. I work for UMB as the supplier diversity representative, but I also have my own.
I mentioned this a couple weeks ago.
Camilla, she was saying something, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I also have my own business. I applied for the PPP and the EID in April and got the funds dispersed then. But I have not applied for loan forgiveness. And I have my sister here with me. She is a contract employee, self-employee. So she applied for that as well. And she's trying to figure out what she needs to do to apply for loan forgiveness.
Okay.
Okay. So it looks like everyone here has already applied for PPP. And now you're in the cycle where you're spending the money and we're just, giving direction in terms of loan forgiveness.
Okay.
I want to make sure too, but so the application period is still open though. And I think one thing to share, it does not close until June 30th and there are still funds available for PPP. So I think congratulations to those on the call that have already applied and have received funding, but let others know to not be discouraged if they have not done that process yet, they can still apply now. And
I'm sorry, Camilla, I was going to ask, what about that EIL? Is that still open? Because I understood that that was closed and there were no opportunities to apply for that. Is that an option currently or not?
That is right. It is closed. What it is open to for right now and what it has been in the last, I think, couple of weeks is agriculture, just for the agriculture industry. So that has closed some time ago. I just was interested in wanted to see how many people applied for it because there was so much confusion between the two and how many people have been awarded at least the advance. But the EIDL has been closed and it's only open for the agriculture industry.
Okay. Do you think it's going to open again? But that's it for.
You know what? I don't want to say that it may not because I know there's still funding, as Camilla just said. There's still a lot of funding left in the PPP. We have quite a few small lenders that are reaching out to us, letting us know that they still are taking applications for the loan forgiveness program. As far as the EIDL, I am not sure what that looks like.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if they're going to open that back up because I don't know if there's a need, if there's other funding in the PPP.
Yeah, and I think it's good to bring up EID. And what people didn't realize is if you did get the EID loan advance, it's subtracted from your loan forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So for those that it was up to $10,000 and then they later provided more descriptions, it was $1,000 per employee.
Mm-hmm.
So if you got $5,000 through an EIDL loan advance, it's deducted from your loan forgiveness amount.
But in addition to that, it was also deducted from your forgiveness. There was so much technical stuff. So I'm not even going to go into that. So if you didn't get an EIDL, then good. You can move forward.
Now, so Natalie, there's an acronym that I have been using and giving you credit for.
Okay.
end last week, right?
Yes.
Can you share, particularly for businesses with employees, what that acronym is and what are the people that you need to have in your network to ensure smooth loan forgiveness?
So this is a Blythe. This is what I tell. So it's B for your banker, L for your lawyer, A for your accountant, I for your insurance, F for your financial advisor, and then we've added the R for our HR person. Because so many things have changed going into our new, whatever we're in, this new, there are lots of standards that have to be changed from an HR perspective on how you open back up a business, how you're now going to test employees. What does it look like in your policy and procedure manual? What is your SOP saying? How are you handling furlough? How are you handling sick time now, right? Not just that, when we go back up to the L for the lawyer, what does your contracts look like now? You've got new contracts. What is that term in the contract? The something majeure? What is that?
Force majeure.
Yes. So that no longer is something that people automatically assumed that was going to cover them in COVID. And going forward, lawyers and small businesses are now looking at that to see whether or not, hey, how do I handle this if an act of God or something happens that is completely out of my control? So you want to make sure that you have those languages corrected in your contract from a supply chain perspective as well, because you may have a contract with someone else to deliver a product. However, your supplier may not be able to get to you to deliver the product, right? So now you have a disruption in your supply chain. What does your contract say about that? Who's responsible for that? So you want to make sure that, going forward, you have contracts that talk literally about these types of things. In the event a pandemic happens and it's out of my control or out of my supplier's control, what am I supposed to do now for my customer, right? Or even if you're working from home, we had one of our lawyers came on and he was so good, and he talked about, a lot of businesses work from home. So they're like, oh, I'm a home-based business. I really don't need any contract. But yes, you are the one specifically that needs to have a contract. And specifically, you need to have that protection around you so that in the event that something happens to you, your home, or whatever the case may be, that this contract helps to support you. And those people who have rental property, obviously, they definitely need to make sure that they have a contract, because a lot of the landlords are now given leniency because they know that there's issues. However, when it comes back to a place of where people are being full occupancy, there's going to be like, hey, I gave you 6 months of no pay, but now you got to pay this plus interest. So make sure that you're clear moving forward of what the contract language says and what the expectation is, and that you can live up to those expectations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know personally, I've worked with some small businesses, Natalie, from an HR perspective, because there's very clear language that you need to retain your employees. You can't get rid of them to get forgiveness, but you can be able to terminate them for cause.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm finding is a lot of small businesses did not have HR policies and procedures.
Right.
There was no description of cause. So if you're a small business and you have employees, I highly recommend that you get an HR consultant. I know a few of them that I'm working with. I'm happy to provide recommendations, but it's really, really critical that you have those things in place, because it doesn't want to appear that you're circumventing the policy by terminating someone to be able to retain, PPP funds. But you mentioned this really quickly, Natalie, about those.
Kamila, can I say something real quick too? I want to go back to something that you made a really good point too, that one of the things that you want to make sure is that those who have been awarded is that you're spending your money, that you've already entered a period of starting to spend your money. I think there's a 10-day window that they would allow for people to, hold on to, because some people are like, oh, I'm going to get my money, I'm going to hold on to it. The purpose was to be an emergency use, right? This is supposed to be an emergency. You're in dire strait, you're in dire need of spending this money. And if you're holding it and not spending it, then it's an indication that you didn't absolutely necessarily need the money. So what you want to make sure you're doing is that, again, getting that documentation, making sure your records are showing that, you know, I got my money on the 10th, but I started spending my money on the 12th or the 15th. I started with a distribution. So you want to make sure you have a clear line of when those monies started to flow out.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier, there was one amendment to this bill, is that the difficulty in bringing back employees, and how if an employee does not come back, it doesn't hinder you from getting loan forgiveness. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, Natalie?
Well, I'm going to elaborate according to what has been the new rule. So the new rule is they have provided a safe harbor from reduction in loan forgiveness based on reductions in full-time equivalent employees for borrowers that are unable to return to the same level of business activity the business was operating at before February the 15th due to the compliances of the Secretary of Health, Human Services, Director of Centers related to workers or customer safety requirements related to COVID-19. So that's one. The second one is they provide a safe harbor from reduction in loan forgiveness based on reductions in full-time equivalent employees to provide protection for borrowers that are both unable to rehire individuals who were employees or of the borrower on February 15th and unable to hire similar qualified employees for unfulfilled positions by December 31st.
Got it.
Those are the safe harbor rules. Now, does that mean that you don't have to bring people on? And, you know, some people are bringing people on and saying, hey, I'm going to bring this person on. I'm going to pay them a bonus. Do not do that. Don't pay them a bonus, because that's not where the funds should be used for, right? Because you want to make sure that you're trying to use this money crossing T's and dotting I's. The other thing is, even with this period of unfilled positions by December 31st, you just still want to be careful that you at least bring back, I would try to bring back at least 50% of my team, you know what I mean? If you don't have the ability to bring back 100. But because of this safe harbor from reduction, you know, bring them back. Because next week we may have another law. That's all I want to say. Ditu told me to put my expression in it. So my expression is, bring them back.
Awesome.
Never know. June 15th, it may be something totally different, and then you're trying to backtrack. And the thing is that you have to backtrack according to the dates.
Mm-hmm.
So when she's talking about what she pulled down from June the 5th and June, you have to backtrack. So it's date oriented. Everything is date oriented.
Thank you, Natalie. So I know we're up on time, but are there any questions that anyone has?
Yeah, it looks like Daryl has a question.
Yes.
Hey, how you doing? Let's see. How would an employer address the issue of not being able to bring back furloughed or laid off workers that are now actually earning more, being in their current position, as opposed after they've received funds to bring back employees? Can they hire different employees, and would that count?
So 2 answers to that. Yes. And the one thing you want to do is you want to have a written document stating that you offer that position to that employee and they refuse to come back.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what that happens is that employee needs to know if they refuse to come back to a position that's offered to them, that can make them ineligible for unemployment anymore.
Mm.
Okay. So you want to make sure you have a documented letter to say, I spoke with XYZ on this day, we offered them this position, and the position is the same salary, things of that nature. Due to whatever their reasoning, they could be fearful for coming back or whatever their reason is, you know, you make sure you document that they refuse to take this position and the company is moving forward with hiring such and such. And then, yes, you can offer somebody else that position.
Yeah, and I think it's important to share that. And one thing I've been saying, Natalie, is everything should be via email. Do not call them. Do not email or letter for everything, for all employee communication. And then to remind people that additional $600, it expires in July. So I think people are holding on to that $600 a week check or addition, know that, you know, we are almost, you know, 6 weeks out from that ending, and to be mindful of that before they decline coming back to work.
Yeah, looks like Amy had a question. Can you just unmute yourself, Amy?
There we go. I have a couple questions. So I was awarded my loan on May 15th, but after I realized that I wasn't really going to be able to make good use of the payroll, and I was going to end up owing more of it than being forgiven. So then it expired, but then they renewed it. So now it's offered to me again, and I have to take it by tomorrow. So does my time frame start from the time that
distribution?
Okay, great. So that's okay. The payroll part, is that also, so my payroll is X amount of dollars to myself, and then I have to pay payroll taxes? Is that part of the payroll cost also?
That would be, Kamila, I'm going to let you answer that because you're the financial guru here, but I would consider, yes, that payroll is whatever you pay for payroll.
Correct, yeah, and the max is up to $100,000 per employee, so it's $8,033 per month.
Okay.
But there was a payroll tax holiday, so they did provide extensions for payroll tax as part of COVID-19. I can't give you the exact dates, Amy, but they did delay the payment in first and second quarter aligned with COVID-19 if you were adversely impacted. So that's something you definitely want to work with.
I'll talk to my CPA about it, it's fine. And then, so that may end up using up all of the funds combined with rent and utilities, but if I say have some money left over, like
Pay yourself. Pay yourself.
But it would be beyond my payroll cost. I have a certain amount of payroll that I'm paying to myself every month. It's part what my tax accountant figured out, blah, blah, blah. So I would be left with $500 maybe. I don't want to, so then I was like, well, what do I do with that?
Work overtime,
Like
Amy.
you just said, you can't use
Work
it
overtime. Work overtime, Amy. Just work overtime.
I mean, it's not a significant amount of money. I would pay I would really, so, and when I say pay yourself, there's not like a limit of, you know what I mean? So you now have a 24-week period to go ahead and pay yourself. So that 500 goes in towards whatever, even if your salary was $1,500, $2,500 a month, you still pay yourself. Use it for your payroll.
Yeah, and then I've been telling people, they don't realize is that whatever you get forgiven from an expense perspective is no longer a tax deduction either.
Yeah, that's fine.
So make sure you think about that before you give that $500 that you may have a higher tax bill if you are earning income from other sources the remainder of the year because you've limited your deductions too.
No, it's just me. Oh, and then somebody said something about the bank that I heard.
Amy, I'm concerned. If it's just you, I got a concern. Because if it's just you and the formula is the 2.5 times your salary, why would you not use that fund to pay your payroll?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just going off the funds that, like, so my payroll to myself every month is like $753 or something. And then my payroll taxes are $358 a month or something like that. So I was just going off those calculations because that's what is on the bank records every month that we then put onto the 941 or whatever that form is.
So the reason I think she's concerned is the calculation for the amount of your funding is solely based on your payroll, and other expenses, right? So because now you have 24 weeks to use these funds, you should be able to use 2.5 times your payroll in a 24-week period. Now, if we were at 8 weeks, there could have been a challenge and there could have been some overage because of that, half a month left over. But when you look at the calculation, if it was done, correctly, be able to exhaust those funds fairly easily if it was based upon 2.5 times your payroll.
Mhm.
Okay. My CPA will figure it out, I guess.
Okay.
We already kind of looked at it, but oh well. I made more money last year, so I don't know. That was what it was based on, last year's income, because tax returns or whatever. So I don't know.
Your CPA, but your CPA could continue the same payroll that you had last year
Right.
to exhaust those funds.
Right, exactly. And remember, it's based on your average monthly salary.
Mm-hmm.
So your only calculation for you should only be based on your average monthly salary. So if your monthly salary is $1,500, then you're only 2.5 times that $1,500. It's not based on your annual. It's based on your average month.
I know.
Okay.
And this is my last question. You said something about the bank the bank that loans the money to me is the bank that I have to have the account where the money is held. Did I hear that?
Camilla, I think you said something in regard to,
When the funding for PPP happened, in the earlier stages, if you applied at said bank, they would only let you apply if you had a bank account with them. And so when you applied, they would put the money in the account that was with them. Now there's more community banks doing it. People are finding other ways of funding. Like e-banks have been more prominent in the second round. So you do have the ability to not have a deposit in that account. But in the first round, most of the accounts were going to the bank in which it was applied for.
Okay. Thank you. You guys are amazing.
Yeah, I think Ted has a question.
Ted has a question.
Can you clarify what the change from 8 weeks to 24 weeks means in the forgiveness computation?
You basically just have a longer period to utilize the fund. So instead of having to use, if you got 20,000, instead of having to use the 20,000 in 8 weeks, you now have 24 weeks to use that 20,000.
And what go ahead.
Go ahead, Natalie.
I think what happened, Ted, to answer you, was that people were confused and nervous about spending the money. So there were more people not utilizing the funds like they probably could have in that 8-week period. And so this extension gives you a longer period to spread out the payments that you would normally have. The other issue was, again, people were having a difficult time bringing people on back into staff, right? So now you went out, you applied for this money. Let's just say you were $15,000 a month was your actual annual regular monthly thing. So now you got $37,000, but you have no staff. You can pay yourself, but you had no staff, right? So what is going on is the government recognizes that, and they're like, listen, we're going to give you the time to go ahead and bring on people so that you can spend that money, so that you're not left with this pocket of money that is no longer unforgivable, right? So now you have a longer period of time to get your monies out so that it can become forgivable. Does that make sense? And so as we look at,
let me play back to you what I think I heard.
Okay.
Because with an 8-week computation period, my best guess, considering the potential exclusions in the employee computations, is that most people using that 8-week period were probably going to wind up having only about half or maybe a little more of their loan forgiven.
Could be.
So, okay,
Could be.
so you're saying that the 24-week period is going to make more of the loan forgivable.
I believe that's what they're hoping. And I can't guarantee that, but I'm hoping that, because when we look at the amount of people who were not able to bring back staff to spend their money on, to your point, you might have had 60% of the people having 50% of their staff showing back up. right? So now they're in a struggle situation of trying to spend this money on payroll.
No, my
So-
clients aren't in that situation.
Your clients are,
They-
well, good
they-
for your
they-
clients.
They continued to operate. The hardship issue had to do with whether their customers would pay, and there would be a shortfall of money coming in.
So supply chain,
In terms of supply chain issues
supply chain issue.
and customer payment issues, receivable collections. So there wasn't any problem spending money, but the 8-week period would not have spent all the money that was borrowed, and the way the original computation was working,
Left them open for a lot more money unforgiven.
left a lot of money unforgiven in the circumstances. And as best I could tell from most of the folks that I know, other than the absolutely pure hardship situations, real situation where the businesses were closed, the capacity to spend was going to be, to spend all the money that they were lent was not going to leave, or let's say was going to leave a lot of money unforgiven in the circumstances, which is still a 1% loan.
So let me ask you this, Ted, then.
Yep.
Why would they be left with so much money if they had no issues with bringing back staff? Because it's really payroll, right?
Yeah.
Operations, you're still going to spend money on operations regardless. 25% of that can go to our operations. So if they had no issues with
The anomaly in this case is that the amount of non-payroll expenses that qualify, let's say, weren't all that large because of the nature of the operating expenses. Because in one case, the company essentially owned the building, they didn't have any rent or interest at that point. So what would have been a large expenditure for some people wasn't for them in the circumstances, and utilities wasn't that big a number in the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So and we're going to spend in gross dollars, 8 weeks worth of payroll when we borrowed in effect 2.5, we borrowed 10 weeks of payroll, which would leave a lot of money, unforgivable.
So the hope is now that they have that 24 weeks, they have
So
more.
if 24 weeks essentially enlarges the window for accumulating expenditures, I got a couple of clients that are really going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We got time for 2 more questions. And I'm going to ask one of the 2 questions.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the actual process? So for a person to go through to get their loan forgiven, what's the process?
So for them to get their loan forgiveness, there is some documentation, more documentation that's going to be coming. But like I said, so the one thing you want to make sure you're doing now, right? Because I don't really know what the paperwork is going to be for them to say, hey, we want to make sure we're checking on you, what you guys got. As for right now, I don't know what that looks like. So the process is right now, keep your own data straight. Keep your funding separate. Speak closely with your accountant, because there may be something that comes from the bank a little later and say, hey, we need you to fill all of this out. We need to make sure you spent this, this, and this. Right now, from what I know, they haven't identified that yet. And I haven't been informed. Kamila, have you?
This is where my slogan comes in. That is, you always pay for good accounting, one way or another.
I love it. So what you do, your steps are to do due diligence now. Don't wait for them to send you something. Just do the due diligence. Get your documents. Use the spreadsheet that Kamila is going to send you guys. Make sure that you have those things in place and it's showing. I'm spending money on rent to his business owner's perspective, they don't have any mortgage. I have several people who own restaurants. They got 15 and 20 employees. They've got seasonal workers. So they're in this whole in between of how do I bring people back and people not coming back. So you want to make sure that whatever happens, you start to record everything that you spent and what you spent it for. And now you have the ability to spend it over the 24-week period.
Absolutely. Kamila, on the key takeaway slide, is there anything you want to foot stump, or Natalie, anything y'all want to foot stump on the key takeaway slide? I think y'all covered most of the, these items during the conversation.
Yeah, and I think the key thing just to share is that the forgiveness is based upon contracts you had in place February 15th of 2020. Natalie mentioned this earlier. I want to make one more comment about it again. This loan is not for expansion. So this is not the time, if you got PPP funds, to move into a bigger building or to expand your business, or, you know, to anything that can create the illusion that you did not have any economic uncertainty to drive you to apply and receive this loan. So making sure that, you know, in working with the Blythe R, that you are reviewing that not only how you're spending money, but were these contracts in place as of February 15th to ensure you can get that forgiveness.
The one thing I would put on this slide is the, 1% for 2 years, and then the extended period after that, which is after June 5th. So I think that's going to be key to people understanding that after June 5th, that there's a 5-year period, a 5-year window that is open for negotiation. So just because you got it before that doesn't mean you only have to settle for the 2-year payback period. Go back to the bank and ask for a negotiation of whether or not you can utilize that 5-year maturity period to start to pay, use that for paying back. Also, what supposedly, I forgot to say this too, Kamila, what supposedly has been extended is the deferral period. Okay. So the deferral period was 6 months. Now I believe it's 10 months. In other words, so you have a 10-month period to start paying that back. Now, again, the way that it's written, there's an interpretation that has not been really clarified. So I believe it's 10 months at this period. So speak with your bank, because this is a bank loan. Speak with the lender, make sure it's guaranteed for the 10 months. Make sure you can negotiate a period of 5 years, because 1% at 5 years, even if something is unforgivable, would be really low. Should be really low.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing I hear loud and clear, and this is one thing that we believe in Urban Financial Services Coalition, is work with the experts. We are putting an end to bootleg, right? We are putting an end to bootleg. We're going to have a ceremony for it. We're no longer bootlegging businesses. We're going to work with professionals, and that way we can take advantage of all the opportunities that are available. So let's give a big round of applause to our 2 colleagues, Kamila and Natalie, for doing a great job. These are some excellent experts. If you have some additional questions, you feel free to reach out to Kamila. Her information is there. Do I have Natalie's information is there? They're experts in their field. They're really good at what they do. And so the conversation doesn't have to end here. The conversation can continue going. And then you can also, if you have your colleagues that really need their expertise, have them reach out to them. So with that, next week, Oli, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say that this information was so valuable for people that actually received that PPP. And I hate that there were not more people participating, because people don't really know. When people get these loans, or they were awarded these monies, now what are you going to do? this, I mean, you know, you all shared some, of course, I didn't get one, but I know people that received those, and I want to take this information back and share. I understand, Kamila, you've got information for us that we can take this back, you and Natalie, but you all did a phenomenal job of explaining all of this. And where my issue always comes is when we have the information to provide to people, but people don't stop and listen and understand until afterwards. They aren't proactive, they're more reactive, which causes so many of us problems financially.
Yes, ma'am.
I just can't hardly understand it, Natalie.
Well, you know what, Miss Ola, I'm going to tell you, we do several we do about 80 workshops throughout the year. 80 workshops, free workshops on various topics, how to gain access to capital. So we're helping people to understand what they need to do to literally get a loan, because a lot of people feel like it's their, one of the biggest questions, can I get this loan on my business? Is it me personally? Well, you don't have a business. So yes, of course it's going to be on you personally, right? So it's misinformation that we are trying to disseminate. And to your point, I always say this, Miss Ola, the people that are on the line are the people that are supposed to be on the line.
Yes.
So don't ever get discouraged about the number of people that are not there. Be encouraged about the people who are here, even though I hear your heart, because I feel the same way too at sometimes. But I absolutely understand that, you know what, these are the right people that are supposed to be here. And hopefully these people that we have touched today can move forward in a more positive way.
Absolutely.
And, seek out more assistance. And even I have a class that I do called Pivoting, Gaining Momentum while Pivoting Past COVID-19, right? So what is it that we're actually doing in this time? Because it has been a slowdown, it has been a pullback. We should be investing in ourselves even more. There's so many free opportunities out there. So we're gonna pray, Miss Ola, together.
Yes.
And I'm gonna send you an email about something that we're having, but we're gonna pray about that. But did Angela ask the question here, if I may, answer the question? One of her questions was, I have a question about getting the loan and collecting unemployment at the same time. So a lot of small businesses did not know that they qualified for different levels of unemployment. So if you were self-employed, independent contractor, there was an unemployment that you were able to get. Now, the fact that you got unemployment, if you are an employee and you're getting unemployment and your boss has hired you to come back for PPP, you want to stop that unemployment. Okay? Unemployment runs in North Carolina for 12 weeks. They extended it under the CARES Act for 15 more weeks, I think it was. It gave us a 23-week period, right? But to Camilla's point, eventually that unemployment's gonna run out. So if if you are an employee and your employer is asking you to come back, you wanna make sure you come back, because once you've exhausted that 25-week unemployment, that is it.
Yes.
If this happens again next year, that is it. And people don't realize they're exhausting the unemployment that is assigned to them. Okay. So if you are if you are the employer, then you don't need to be collecting unemployment and you got the PPP. Again, you need to slice.
Yeah, and I think it's important you mentioned, because there is a weekly attestation for unemployment where they ask for other sources of income. Yes. And if you got PPP funds in your bank account on Friday and you're doing your attestation for unemployment on a Monday, you could be committing fraud.
Yes.
Right.
And people don't realize different states vary, but they can go back, pull your unemployment. You can be fined up to 50% of the amount of unemployment you received that was not correct. So not only are you paying what you got, you're paying up to a 50% penalty back. And that's actually in Maryland. A few of you are in Maryland. So thank you for bringing that up, Natalie. It's really important that you are making an attestation every single week you get unemployment, and it's fraud if you receive PPP funds and you continue to get unemployment, or you don't disclose the other sources of income that you have.
Absolutely. And see, when I told y'all these young ladies were smart, I know y'all didn't believe me. I'm telling you, these ladies are smart, so they need to be a part of your Blythe R team.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all.
I got a
and
lot
so-
of work for both of them to do too, D2. I can't wait to talk to you.
Can't wait.
Y'all better call me because I got some work for you ladies too. I need some help around here.
Absolutely. So next week we continue our COVID relief series. We're kind of switching gears a little bit, and we're looking at more from the perspective of internships. So a lot of people work during the summer during doing internships. What prepares young people for the job market is to get relevant work experience. So we are going to bring on Sekou Kalin, who's going to be talking about the J.P. Morgan Chase Advancing Black Pathways program. Jamie Dimon, the CEO for J.P. Morgan Chase, said a couple of years ago that we're not doing enough to position our people of color for success. And so he's been intentional about doing that, and he tapped Sekou Kalin to run that program. And so he's going to share some information about that program and what they are doing to continue to prepare young people to come into the financial services industry. So that'll be at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. Be on the lookout for the email invitation on that. If you're not a member of Urban Financial Services Coalition, we got plenty of room. We are about a community, about informing, educating, and inspiring the next generation of financial professionals. And we believe in the concept that to whom much is given, much is required. So we have to share that information with others. You can visit our website, and it's a small investment to become a member and to help us to put on these great programs. And then I always like to end with this saying, be a river, not a reservoir. So what is a reservoir? A reservoir keeps all of the life, all of the information in its arms, in its particular barrier. And everything in it starts to die over time, but not a river. A river takes all of the life and it spreads it out, and it continues to share that information everywhere it goes, and everywhere it goes, it turns things green. Now, so that green might be money. That green might be a great relationship. That green may be a good impact in your community. So take this information, please share it with others. In the next 2 or 3 days, we'll have the recording available. We'll host it on the UFSC site so you can share it with your other colleagues that missed it. And we'll be sure to put, this is the information at this point in time.
At this point.
Because we never know what things are going to change, because it's changing so fast. So I would ask all of you to unmute yourself, and let's all say goodbye and good night to each other.
All right. Good night. Thank you all.
Thank you. You're amazing.
Hi. Hi.
Night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for everything. Yeah.
RJ
Thanks,
never
Natalie.
showed his
Behind the
screen.
interwebs.
All right,
Absolutely.
Daryl.
Good night.
Take
Good
care. You all
night.
have a great evening. Bye, Amy.
Bye.